The Publix where I work sits on the corner of Bird Road and Southwest 42nd Avenue in Coral Gables, wedged between a nail salon and a Sedano's that closed down 3 years ago. I've been pulling night shifts here since I graduated from Miami-Dade College last spring, stocking shelves, running the floor buffer, accepting deliveries from the loading dock and back. My name is Danny Vega, and until 6 weeks ago, I thought this was just another overnight retail gig. The store itself is unremarkable. Built in 1987, renovated twice. Same green and white color scheme as every other Publix in South Florida. We've got the deli counter, the bakery, the pharmacy window that closes at 10. During the day, the aisles fill with retirees buying lottery tickets and young mothers arguing with toddlers about cereal choices. At night, it belongs to me and whoever else drew the short straw on the schedule. My supervisor is a woman named Caridad Mendez. She's worked at this location for 23 years, and she runs the overnight crew like a sergeant running a platoon. Gray-streaked hair pulled back tight, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and a voice that could cut through a hurricane siren. When I first started, I figured she was just another micromanager counting down to retirement. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things. It started my 3rd week on the job. Caridad pulled me aside after my shift and handed me a laminated index card. The plastic was yellowed, the edges soft from years of handling. "Keep this in your pocket," she said. "Don't lose it. Don't show it to anyone who doesn't already have one." I looked at the card, 6 rules, typed in faded ink, with a 7th scrawled in ballpoint at the bottom, like someone had added it later. What is this? Caridad's eyes went somewhere far away for a moment. "Insurance," she said. "This store has history, Danny. Most of Florida does. Hurricane Andrew passed through here in '92. Tore up everything south of Kendall. Killed people. Erased whole neighborhoods. Things like that leave marks." She tapped the card in my hand. "Some marks don't fade. Some deliveries never get completed. Some people are still trying to finish shifts. They started 32 years ago. You follow these rules. You'll be fine. You ignore them. You become part of the history yourself." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to ask if this was some kind of hazing thing the overnight crew did to new hires. But there was nothing in Caridad's face that suggested she was joking. There was something else there instead, something I'd later learned to recognize as the quiet terror of someone who'd seen exactly what happens when the rules get broken. "August is coming," she said. "The anniversary. That's when it gets bad." She walked away before I could ask anything else. I should have quit that night. I should have handed back the card and found a job somewhere safer. A 7-Eleven, a Wawa. Anywhere without 32 years of grief soaked into the concrete. But I didn't, and now I need to tell you what I saw. The rules on Caridad's laminated card were simple enough. I read them in the break room during my lunch at 2 a.m., sitting under the buzzing vending machines with a Cuban sandwich from the deli counter going cold in front of me. Rule 1. Between midnight and 4 a.m., if you hear the loading dock alarm, do not investigate alone. Radio for backup first. If no one responds within 60 seconds, do not investigate at all. Rule 2. The walk-in freezer in the back must remain locked from 3 a.m. to 3:33 a.m. Do not open it for any reason during this window, even if you hear knocking from inside. Rule 3. If a delivery truck arrives that isn't on the night's manifest, do not accept the shipment. Do not sign anything. Do not speak to the driver beyond confirming you cannot help them. Rule 4. The store's emergency broadcast system will occasionally activate on its own. If it begins playing hurricane warnings, check your phone. If there is no actual storm, turn off the PA system immediately and do not listen to the full message. Rule 5. Between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., a woman may appear in aisle 7 near the canned goods. She will be wearing the yellow raincoat. Do not approach her. Do not ask if she needs help. She is not a customer. Rule 6. If you see a man in an old Publix uniform wandering the store after midnight, he may ask you to help him finish his route. Politely decline. Do not follow him to the loading dock. The 7th rule was the one scrawled in ballpoint, the handwriting cramped and urgent. Rule 7. If you break any of the above rules, tell Caridad immediately. There may still be time. I folded the card and slipped it into my back pocket. The whole thing felt ridiculous, like something from a campfire story, designed to spook new employees into staying alert during the dead hours. I figured I'd play along for a few weeks, then quietly lose the card in my laundry. That plan lasted exactly 4 nights. It was August 19th, 5 days before the anniversary Caridad had mentioned. I was restocking the bottled water aisle, hurricane season ritual, even when no storms were brewing, when the PA system crackled to life. I hadn't touched it. The overnight DJ, as we called whoever controlled the music, was a preset playlist that ran automatically. But the music cut out mid-song, replaced by a voice I didn't recognize. Male, calm, professional. The kind of voice you'd hear on the newscast. This is an emergency broadcast for Miami-Dade County. Hurricane Andrew has made landfall south of Homestead with sustained winds exceeding 160 miles per hour. All residents are advised to shelter in place immediately. Repeat, this is not a drill. Hurricane Andrew has made landfall. I pulled out my phone. No alerts, no warnings. The weather app showed clear skies and calm winds for the next 5 days. My hands felt clumsy as I jogged to the front of the store, where the PA controls were mounted behind the customer service desk. The broadcast continued, the voice growing more urgent, describing damage reports from areas I recognized: Cutler Ridge, Perrine, Florida City, streets I'd driven down 100 times. I reached the desk and slapped the PA power switch. The voice cut off mid-sentence. Silence flooded the store. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter than before, the shadows between the aisles deeper. I stood there, one hand still on the switch, breathing harder than I should have been. Then I heard it. A shopping cart, rolling slowly down one of the aisles toward the back of the store. I turned, scanning the checkout lanes, the produce section, the pharmacy window with its metal gate pulled down. The store was empty. We didn't have any customers. Hadn't since a college kid bought Red Bull and rolling papers around 11:30. The cart kept moving. I could hear its wheels clicking over the tile, that familiar uneven rhythm of a cart with one bad caster. It was coming from aisle 7. I checked my phone. 2:17 a.m. The card in my pocket suddenly felt heavier than laminated plastic had any right to feel. I thought about Rule 5, the woman in the yellow raincoat, the warning not to approach, the flat statement that she wasn't a customer. I didn't go to aisle 7. Instead, I walked to the break room, poured myself coffee I didn't want, and sat with my back to the wall until 3 a.m. came and went. When I finally worked up the nerve to check the canned goods section, there was nothing there. No cart, no woman. Just rows of Campbell's soup and Goya beans, perfectly aligned, exactly as I'd left them. But on the floor, near the end cap display of hurricane supplies, there was a small puddle of water. Rainwater from the smell of it. And a single yellow thread caught on the edge of a shelf, fluttering in the air conditioning like it was waving goodbye. I kept the card after that. The next few nights passed without incident. I followed the rules, kept my head down, and tried to convince myself that the PA broadcast had been a glitch, the shopping cart some trick of acoustics bouncing off the tile floors. The rainwater puddle was probably condensation from a leaky AC vent. The yellow thread could have come from anyone's jacket. I almost believed it. On August 22nd, 2 days before the anniversary, Caridad paired me with another overnight stalker named Ernesto Batista. He was in his late 50s, built like a man who'd spent his youth loading trucks, with gray stubble and a tattoo of the Virgin Mary on his left forearm. He'd worked at this Publix since 1989, which meant he'd been here when Andrew hit. We were breaking down pallets in the stockroom around 1 a.m. when I decided to ask him about the card. "Caridad gave you the rules," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, third week." Ernesto set down the box cutter he'd been using and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe, or recognition. "You seen anything yet?" I told him about the PA broadcast, the shopping cart in aisle 7, the puddle and the thread. He nodded like I was describing the weather. "That's just the beginning," he said. "It gets worse the closer we get to the 24th. Every year, same pattern. The store remembers what happened, or maybe what almost happened. I never figured out which." "What do you mean, almost happened?" Ernesto leaned against a shelf of paper towels and crossed his arms. "You know about the Homestead store? Publix 547? Caridad mentioned it, said it got destroyed in the hurricane." "Destroyed?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's one word for it. The whole building came apart like wet cardboard. Roof peeled off first, then the walls caved in. There were people inside, employees, customers who thought it would be safer than their trailer homes. 11 people died in that store. They found bodies in the freezer section 3 days later." "In the freezer?" "That's where they went to shelter. Thought the insulated walls would protect them. The freezer held for a while, but when the roof collapsed, it crushed the door frame. Sealed them in. By the time rescue crews cut through the debris, they'd been trapped for 60 hours. No power, no ventilation. Some suffocated. Some froze when the backup generator kicked the compressor back on." He shook his head. "They say you could hear them screaming for help, but nobody could get to them in time. The storm was too strong. Roads were blocked with debris." I thought about Rule 2, the walk-in freezer in the back, the instruction to keep it locked between 3 a.m. and 3:33 a.m. "Why does our store have rules about it?" I asked. "We're in Coral Gables. Andrew hit Homestead. Doesn't matter. All the Publix stores in South Florida are connected somehow. Same supply chain, same distribution network, same... I don't know. Same grief, maybe. The people who died in Homestead, they were part of the family. And some of them haven't figured out they're gone yet. They're still looking for shelter. Still trying to find somewhere safe." Before I could respond, the walkie-talkie on my belt crackled. "Danny." It was Caridad's voice, tense and clipped. "What's your 20? "Stockroom, with Ernesto. Get to the back hallway now and bring Ernesto with you." We found her standing outside the walk-in freezer, arms folded, staring at the heavy steel door like it owed her money. The temperature readout above the handle showed 28 degrees, normal operating range. But there was frost creeping around the edges of the door frame, thick and white, spreading across the concrete floor in feathered patterns. It was 2:58 a.m. "I heard something," Caridad said, her voice low. "From inside. Started about 10 minutes ago." I listened. At first, there was nothing. Just the hum of the compressor unit mounted on the wall, the distant whir of the HVAC system. Then I caught it. A sound from behind the steel door, muffled but distinct. Knocking. 3 slow knocks. A pause. Then 3 more. "It's not 3 o'clock yet," Ernesto said, checking his watch. "We've still got a minute." "I know the time." Caridad's jaw was tight. "But they're early this year. They've never been early before." The knocking came again, faster now, more urgent. And beneath it, something else. A voice. No, voices. Multiple people speaking over each other in frantic, overlapping whispers that I couldn't quite make out. The frost on the door frame thickened. I watched it spread across the handle, encasing the metal in a shell of white ice. "Nobody touches that door," Caridad said. "Nobody opens it until 3:34. I don't care what you hear." The clock on the wall ticked over to 3 a.m. The whispers stopped. The knocking stopped. For a moment, there was perfect silence. Then something hit the door from the inside. Hard. The steel panel bowed outward, frost cracking and falling to the floor in glittering shards. Caridad stepped back. Ernesto made the sign of the cross. Another impact. The door groaned on its hinges. "They're scared," I heard myself say. "They think the storm is coming. They're trying to get out." "They can't get out," Caridad said. "And we can't let them. If that door opens before 3:33, they come through. And they don't go back." A third impact. The temperature readout flickered, numbers scrambling, then settling on a reading that made my breath catch. -47 degrees. The frost was climbing the walls now, spreading across the concrete in jagged fractal patterns. I could see my breath fogging in the air, feel the cold seeping through my uniform shirt. And through the door, clear as a bell, I heard a woman's voice. She was crying, begging. "Please, please, we can't breathe in here. Please let us out. The storm is over. Why won't anyone let us out?" I stepped toward the door. Ernesto's hand clamped down on my shoulder, pulling me back. "Don't," he said. "She's been saying that for 32 years. The storm isn't over for them. It's never going to be over." We stood there in the freezing hallway, watching the frost spread, listening to the voices plead, until the clock finally showed 3:33 a.m. At 3:34, the cold vanished. The frost melted in seconds, leaving nothing but wet concrete and the faint smell of ozone. I checked the temperature readout. 28 degrees. Normal. Caridad unlocked the freezer and pulled the door open. Inside, there was nothing but pallets of frozen vegetables and ice cream, arranged exactly as they'd been when we closed for the night. But on the floor, in the far corner, I saw something that hadn't been there before. 11 sets of footprints, outlined in frost, pressed into the concrete like they'd been standing there for hours. Waiting. August 23rd, the night before the anniversary. I almost called in sick. Spent 20 minutes sitting in my car in the parking lot, engine running, AC blasting, trying to convince myself that a retail job wasn't worth whatever was waiting for me inside that store. I could drive to Tampa. I had a cousin there. Pick up shifts at a Winn-Dixie or something. Start fresh somewhere that didn't have 32 years of dead people trying to claw their way back through the freezer door. But I thought about Caridad, about Ernesto, about the way they'd looked at me after the freezer incident. Not with fear, but with something like solidarity. They'd been carrying this weight for years, decades in Ernesto's case. They showed up every night, followed the rules, kept the store running while ghosts wandered the aisles looking for shelter from a storm that ended before I was born. I couldn't just leave them to handle it alone. The store was quiet when I clocked in at 11 p.m. Caridad was already there, going over the next day's delivery schedule with a red pen, crossing things out, rearranging. Ernesto was mopping the produce section, his earbuds in, nodding along to something I couldn't hear. "Anything I should know?" I asked Caridad. She didn't look up from her paperwork. "Stay away from aisle 7 tonight. She's been active all week, showed up on the security cameras twice yesterday. Once at 2:15, once at 2:40. Getting restless." The woman in the yellow raincoat. Her name was Marisol. Caridad set down her pen and finally met my eyes. Marisol Aguirre. She was 26 years old. Worked at the Homestead store as a cashier. Had a little girl, 4 years old, named Lucia. She died in the hurricane? She died trying to get to her daughter. When Andrew hit, Marisol was working the morning shift. Her mother was watching Lucia at their apartment in Florida City. The storm came faster than anyone expected. The track shifted overnight, and by the time people realized Homestead was in the direct path, it was too late to evacuate. Marisol left the store around noon, tried to drive south to get Lucia. Her car was found 2 days later on US 1, flipped into a drainage canal. They think a piece of debris, part of a roof, maybe a road sign, hit the windshield while she was driving. I thought about the yellow raincoat, the shopping cart rolling through the empty aisle, the puddle of rainwater on the floor. She's still trying to get to her daughter. Caridad nodded. Every August, she shows up in stores across South Florida, looking for something. We think she's trying to find supplies, diapers, formula, juice boxes, things for Lucia, things she never got to bring home. What happened to the little girl? To Lucia? She survived. Her grandmother got her into a bathtub and covered her with mattresses when the apartment started coming apart. Lucia is in her late 30s now. Lives in Orlando, I think. Has kids of her own. Caridad's voice softened. But Marisol doesn't know that. She's stuck in the last day of her life, trying to finish an errand she never completed. The clock above the customer service desk showed 11:47 p.m. I had a little over 2 hours before the window when Marisol typically appeared. What happens if someone talks to her? I asked. The rule says not to approach, not to ask if she needs help. But what if someone did? Caridad was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful, measured. There was a stock boy, about 15 years ago. His name was Gabriel. Young kid, maybe 19. First week on the job. Nobody told him about the rules in time. She paused. He saw Marisol in aisle 7 and asked if she needed help finding anything. Just being polite, doing his job. What happened? She looked at him, really looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Then she grabbed his arm and started pulling him toward the back of the store, toward the loading dock. She was saying something about needing to get to Florida City, needing to get to her baby, asking him to help her find her car. Gabriel tried to pull away, but she was strong, stronger than she should have been. Caridad rubbed her forearm absently, like she was remembering something painful. Ernesto and I heard him screaming. By the time we got there, she'd dragged him halfway across the stockroom. His arm was covered in frost. Actual frost, like he'd stuck it in the freezer. We had to pry her fingers off one by one. She kept apologizing the whole time, crying, saying she didn't mean to hurt anyone. She just needed help getting home. Is Gabriel okay? He quit the next day, moved to Georgia. Last I heard, he still can't feel anything in 3 of his fingers, nerve damage from the cold. I absorbed this in silence. Outside, through the front windows, I could see palm trees swaying in a light breeze. A normal August night in South Florida. No storms on the radar. No warnings scrolling across the bottom of TV screens. But inside the store, the air felt heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. At 1:30 a.m., I was restocking the cereal aisle, 1 row over from aisle 7, when I heard it. Not a shopping cart this time. Footsteps, slow and wet, like someone walking in soaked shoes. I pressed myself against the shelving unit and peered around the corner. She was there. Marisol Aguirre stood in the middle of aisle 7, facing away from me. Her yellow raincoat slipped with water that dripped onto the tile floor. Her dark hair hung in wet tangles down her back. She was standing in front of the baby supplies section, diapers, wipes, formula, reaching out to touch the packages with trembling fingers. I could hear her whispering, the same words over and over. Lucia, I'm coming, baby. Mommy's coming. Just wait for me. Just wait. She picked up a package of diapers and held it against her chest like it was precious. Then she turned, and I saw her face. She looked young, tired, scared. Her eyes were red from crying, her lips blue from cold, her skin pale as candle wax. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like a mother who would do anything to get back to her child. For a moment, our eyes met. I don't know what she saw when she looked at me. Maybe nothing. Maybe I was just another shape in a store full of shapes, irrelevant to her single-minded mission. Maybe she saw someone who could help her, another soul to drag toward the loading dock in her endless search for a way home. But something in her expression shifted. A flicker of recognition, or maybe confusion. She tilted her head, water dripping from the hood of her raincoat, and opened her mouth like she was about to speak. I stepped back, broke eye contact, turned and walked toward the front of the store without running, without looking back, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. When I reached the customer service desk, Caridad was waiting. "You saw her," she said. "Yeah." "Did she speak to you?" "No, almost, but no." Caridad exhaled slowly. "Good. That's good." She checked the clock. 1:52 a.m. She'll be gone by 3. They always fade out before the freezer window starts. It's like they take turns. I spent the rest of the night at the front registers, pretending to organize candy displays, trying not to think about the look on Marisol's face, the desperation, the love. At 4 a.m., I walked back to aisle 7. The floor was dry. The baby supplies were undisturbed. But sitting on the bottom shelf, tucked behind a row of formula cans, I found a photograph. Water damaged, edges curling, colors faded by time. A young woman in a yellow raincoat, holding a little girl with dark curly hair, both of them smiling. On the back, in faded pen, Marisol and Lucia, Easter 1992. 4 months before the hurricane. I kept the photograph. I don't know why. It felt wrong to throw it away. August 24th. 32 years to the day. I arrived at the store an hour early, parking in the employee lot behind the building where the delivery trucks usually pulled up. The sun was setting over Coral Gables, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the air had that thick, humid weight that meant rain was coming. Not a hurricane, just a typical late summer thunderstorm rolling in from the Everglades. But something felt different tonight. The parking lot was too quiet. No birds calling from the power lines. No distant traffic noise from Bird Road. Even the palm trees seemed to be holding still, their fronds hanging limp in the motionless air. Caridad met me at the back entrance. She looked tired, more tired than I had ever seen her. Dark circles under her eyes, her usually crisp uniform wrinkled like she'd slept in it. "Tonight's going to be bad," she said without preamble. Ernesto called in. His wife is sick, real sick, not an excuse. So it's just you and me until 6 a.m. "What about the rules? The one about not investigating the loading dock alone. We'll have to stay together as much as possible. If we get separated, use the radio. And Danny?" She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "If he shows up tonight, the delivery driver, do not engage with him. I don't care what he says. I don't care how sad he looks. You do not accept that delivery. Understand?" I nodded. I understood. The first few hours passed without incident. We restocked shelves, ran the floor buffer, checked expiration dates on the dairy products. Normal overnight work. The storm rolled in around 1 a.m., rain hammering against the windows, lightning flickering in the distance. The lights dimmed twice, but held steady. At 2:30 a.m., I was in the back office entering inventory numbers into the computer when I heard it. The loading dock alarm. That shrill electronic beep that meant someone had opened the bay door from outside. I looked at the delivery schedule pinned to the corkboard above the desk. Nothing was scheduled until 6 a.m. A bread delivery from the Deerfield Beach Distribution Center. I grabbed my radio. Caridad, you copy? The dock alarm just went off. Static. Then her voice, thin and distant. I heard it. I'm in the pharmacy. Stay where you are. I'm coming to you. But I was already moving. I don't know why. Something pulled me toward the loading dock. Not a physical force, but something deeper. A compulsion. A need to see. The back hallway was dark. The motion sensor lights slower to activate than usual. My footsteps echoed off the concrete walls as I approached the heavy door that led to the dock. Through the small window, I could see the bay door was open, rain blowing in sideways, and beyond it, a truck, a refrigerated delivery truck, white with the old Publix logo on the side, the one from the 80s and 90s before they updated the design. The engine was running, exhaust mixing with the rain, headlights cutting through the darkness. I pushed through the door and stepped onto the loading dock. The truck's trailer doors were open. Inside, I could see pallets stacked high with supplies, canned goods, bottled water, batteries, flashlights, tarps and rope and first aid kits, everything you need to survive a hurricane. There was a clipboard hanging from the hook just inside the trailer. I reached for it without thinking, my fingers closing around the cold metal clip. The manifest was dated August 24th, 1992. Delivery address, Publix number 547, Homestead, Florida. Driver, Michael Torres. The paper was yellowed but dry, protected somehow from the rain that was soaking through my uniform shirt. You work here? The voice came from behind me. I spun around. A man stood at the edge of the loading dock, just inside the shelter of the overhang. He was wearing an old Publix uniform, the outdated style with the different logo on the chest. His hair was dark and wet, plastered to his forehead. He looked exhausted. Not tired the way Caridad looked tired. Exhausted the way someone looks after they've been awake for days, weeks, years. His skin had a grayish pallor, and his eyes were sunken, ringed with shadows so deep they looked like bruises. "I'm Michael," he said. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been talking for a long time without water. "Michael Torres. I've got a delivery here. Hurricane supplies. They're for the shelter and homestead. They're setting up at the store down there. Supposed to have everything ready before the storm hits." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The rain was hammering down around us, but I barely felt it. "The thing is," Michael continued, taking a step closer, "I can't find the homestead store. I've been driving all night, but the roads don't make sense anymore. Everything looks different. And my GPS..." He laughed, a broken sound. "My GPS keeps saying the address doesn't exist. But it has to exist, right? It's on the manifest. Publix 547. I've delivered there before." "Michael," I heard myself say, "what year do you think it is?" He blinked at me. Confusion rippled across his face, then something like fear. "It's 1992. August 24th. Hurricane Andrew is making landfall tonight." He gestured at the rain. "That's why I've got to get these supplies to Homestead. People are counting on them. Families, kids. They're going to shelter at the store and they need food and water and..." His voice cracked. "I've got a wife, Elena. 2 kids. Diego is 7. Camila just turned 5. They're at home in Hialeah. I told them I'd be back by morning. I just need to finish this delivery and I can go home." Behind me, I heard the door bang open. "Danny, step away from him." Caridad's voice was sharp, commanding. "Step away right now." But Michael was looking at me with those hollow, desperate eyes, and I saw something in them that I recognized. The same thing I'd seen in Marisol's face the night before. Not malice, not hunger, just a terrible, aching need to complete something that could never be completed. "Please," Michael said. 32 years. I've been trying to deliver this load for 32 years. Every August 24th, I drive to every Publix in South Florida, trying to find someone who'll take it, trying to finish my route. I just want to go home. I want to see my kids. Please, can you accept the delivery? Just sign the manifest and I can go home." He held out a pen, old-fashioned blue plastic, the kind they don't make anymore. I reached for it. Caridad's hand closed around my wrist like a vice, yanking me backward. The pen clattered to the concrete. "Don't," she hissed in my ear. "If you sign that manifest, you take on his route. You become the driver. And you'll be looking for that store forever, just like him." Michael's face crumpled. The exhaustion, the desperation, the decades of driving through endless nights. It all collapsed into something that looked like grief. "Please," he whispered. "I'm so tired. I just want to go home." The loading dock alarm started beeping again. The truck's headlights flickered once, twice, and then Michael Torres turned and walked back to his truck, climbed into the cab, and pulled the door shut behind him. The engine revved. The truck began to back away from the dock, pulling out into the rain. I watched it disappear into the storm, taillights fading until they were just two red pinpricks in the darkness. And then they were gone. Caridad let go of my wrist. Her hands were shaking. "He'll be back," she said quietly. "He always comes back. Every year, same night, same story. And every year we have to turn him away." I looked down at the concrete where the pen had fallen. It wasn't there anymore. The rest of the anniversary night was chaos. After Michael's truck vanished into the rain, Caridad and I barely had time to catch our breath before the PA system crackled to life again. The same broadcast from before. Hurricane Andrew making landfall. Sustained winds exceeding 160 miles per hour. All residents advised to shelter in place. But this time, the voice kept cutting out, replaced by bursts of static and fragments of other transmissions. Emergency services calling for rescue crews. A woman crying for help. A man shouting coordinates that didn't match any location I recognized. We killed the PA, but it came back on twice more before 4 a.m. The freezer started early, too. The knocking began at 2:45 instead of 3 o'clock, and this time, the voices were louder, clearer. I could make out individual words, names being called, prayers being recited, someone counting backward from 100 like they were trying to stay calm. The frost spread farther than the night before, creeping halfway down the back hallway, turning the concrete floor into a skating rink of black ice. And Marisol, she appeared 3 times instead of once. First in aisle 7, then near the pharmacy, then standing at the front windows, staring out at the storm like she was trying to figure out which direction to drive. Each time, she was clutching something different. Diapers, then a stuffed animal from the seasonal display, then a set of car keys that jingled in her frost-white fingers. By 5 a.m., I was running on adrenaline and vending machine coffee, my nerves frayed down to raw wire. Caridad looked even worse. She'd stopped talking an hour earlier, just moving through the store on autopilot, checking locks, resetting alarms, doing whatever needed to be done to keep things contained. When the sun finally started to rise, the storm breaking apart into scattered clouds, I felt something release in my chest. The pressure that had been building all night. That sense of wrongness, of being watched, of standing on the edge of something vast and hungry. It began to fade. Caridad found me sitting on an overturned milk crate in the stockroom, staring at nothing. "You did good," she said. "First anniversary is always the hardest. It gets easier." "Does it?" I looked up at her. "Does it actually get easier, or do you just get better at pretending it's normal?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I clocked out at 6:30 after the morning crew arrived and the bread delivery pulled up to the loading dock. A real delivery this time from a real driver who complained about the traffic on I-95 and asked if we had any coffee brewing. I walked to my car in the gray morning light, unlocked the door, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. I couldn't stop thinking about Michael Torres. The look on his face when we turned him away. The desperation in his voice when he talked about his wife and kids. 32 years of driving through the same night, looking for a store that didn't exist anymore, trying to complete a delivery that could never be completed. And why? Because he'd volunteered to help people. Because he'd tried to do the right thing. There had to be a way to break the cycle. There had to be something more than just following the rules and turning him away year after year until the end of time. I drove home, showered, and tried to sleep. It didn't work. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael's hollow gaze, heard his voice asking me to sign the manifest. So I gave up on rest and opened my laptop instead. Michael Torres, Hurricane Andrew, Publix delivery driver, 1992. The search results were sparse at first. Andrew had killed 65 people and caused billions in damage. In the chaos of that disaster, individual stories got lost. But I kept digging, cross-referencing names and dates, scrolling through archived news articles and memorial pages. I found him in a Miami Herald piece from September 1992, a retrospective on the storm's victims. A small paragraph, barely 100 words. Michael Torres, 34, of Hialeah, was found dead in his delivery truck on Florida's Turnpike near the Homestead exit. Torres had been transporting emergency supplies to a Publix store designated as a community shelter when the storm made landfall. His truck was discovered beneath a collapsed overpass, crushed by fallen concrete. Torres is survived by his wife, Elena, and 2 children, Diego and Camila. I stared at the screen for a long time. 34 years old. 2 kids, 7 and 5. He'd been trying to get supplies to a shelter, a place where families were huddled together, waiting out the worst storm to hit Florida in decades. He'd known it was dangerous. He'd gone anyway. And now he was stuck in an endless loop, punished for trying to help, because the store he was driving to had been destroyed before he could reach it. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. And I couldn't accept that the only option was to follow the rules and let him suffer for another 32 years. I kept searching. Elena Torres, Hialeah. I found an obituary from 2018. She'd passed away from cancer, survived by her children Diego and Camila, 6 grandchildren, and her sister Rosa. The obituary mentioned that Elena had never remarried after losing her husband in Hurricane Andrew. 26 years. She'd waited for him for 26 years before she died. Diego Torres was harder to find, but I tracked him down eventually. He was 41 now, lived in Pembroke Pines, worked as an electrician. His Facebook profile was mostly private, but his profile picture showed a man with his father's dark hair and tired eyes, standing next to a woman and 3 kids at what looked like a Disney World entrance. Camila Torres, Camila Reyes now after marriage, lived in Kendall. She was a nurse at Baptist Hospital. Her profile was more public, filled with pictures of her family, her garden, her 2 golden retrievers. In one photo, posted on Father's Day 3 years ago, she was holding a framed picture of a man in a Publix uniform. "Miss you every day, Poppy," the caption read. "Still waiting for you to come home." I closed the laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw stars. They were still waiting. After all this time, his children were still waiting. And somewhere out there, driving through a night that never ended. Michael Torres was still trying to reach them. I made a decision. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe it was dangerous. Maybe I was about to break every rule Caridad had given me and end up trapped in that truck alongside Michael, delivering supplies to a ghost store until the sun burned out. But I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Not anymore. I spent the next 3 days researching. The old Publix number 547 location in Homestead. The rebuilt shopping center that stood there now. The history of the site. The memorials that had been erected for Andrew's victims. The annual remembrance ceremonies held every August. There was no memorial for Michael Torres. No plaque, no marker, no acknowledgement that he died trying to save lives. His name wasn't on any of the official lists. He'd been forgotten. Just another casualty in a storm that had killed dozens and displaced hundreds of thousands. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe the reason Michael couldn't complete his delivery, couldn't find peace, wasn't because the store was gone. Maybe it was because no one remembered why he'd been driving toward it in the first place. I called the Homestead City Planning Office, then the Miami-Dade Historical Society, then a local journalist who'd written a book about Andrew's aftermath. I explained what I wanted to do. A small memorial, a plaque, something to honor the delivery drivers and supply workers who'd risked their lives during the storm. Most people thought I was crazy. A few thought I was running some kind of scam. But one woman, a retired teacher named Doris Whitfield who'd lost her own husband and Andrew, understood. "Nobody remembers the helpers," she said over the phone, her voice thin with age but steady with conviction. "The first responders get monuments. The politicians get their names on buildings. But the regular people, the ones who just showed up to do their jobs even when the world was falling apart, they get forgotten. And that's not right." Doris knew people, city council members, business owners, survivors who'd rebuilt their lives in Homestead and wanted to give back. Within a week, she'd pulled together enough support to make it happen. The memorial would be placed at the corner of Campbell Drive and US 1, near the site of the old Publix number 547. A bronze plaque mounted on a concrete pedestal, listing the names of everyone who died trying to deliver supplies or provide services during the hurricane. Michael Torres would be at the top. The dedication ceremony was scheduled for August 24th. 1 year from the anniversary I'd just survived. I had 12 months to wait. 12 months to hope that I wasn't wrong about this. 12 months of night shifts at the Coral Gables Publix, following the rules, watching Marisol wander the aisles, listening to the voices in the freezer, turning away Michael's truck every time it appeared. But for the first time since Caridad handed me that laminated card, I felt something other than fear. I felt hope. The year passed slowly, measured in night shifts and supernatural encounters. I learned the rhythms of the store, the way the PA system would crackle with phantom broadcasts during thunderstorms, even in months far from the anniversary. The soft footsteps in aisle 7 that came and went without pattern, sometimes accompanied by the smell of rain, sometimes by a child's laughter that seemed to echo from somewhere far away. The occasional flicker in the freezer temperature that made everyone tense up, even when the clock showed it was nowhere near the danger window. Caridad never asked why I'd started researching Hurricane Andrew. She noticed the books I brought to read during breaks. Accounts of the storm, survivor testimonies, engineering reports on why so many buildings had failed. She saw the notes I scribbled in a pocket notebook, names and dates and locations. But she didn't ask. I think she knew, and I think she was afraid to hope. Ernesto was more direct. One night in October, he caught me on the phone with Doris Whitfield, discussing the wording for the memorial plaque. "You're trying to fix it," he said after I hung up. "Not a question. I'm trying something." He was quiet for a long moment, stacking cans of black beans on a shelf, with the care of someone who'd done the same motion 10,000 times. "I tried once," he said finally. "Back in 2003. Thought maybe if I could find Michael's family, tell them what was happening, they could. I don't know. Forgive him. Release him. Whatever spirits need." He shook his head. "I found his wife, Elena. She was living in the same house in Hialeah, the one they'd shared before he died. I drove out there, sat in my car for an hour, trying to figure out what to say. How do you tell a widow that her husband's ghost is still driving a delivery route every August? What happened? I couldn't do it. Couldn't knock on the door. What if I was wrong? What if I just made her grief worse?" Ernesto set down the last can and turned to face me. "You're braver than me, Danny. Or maybe just younger. Young enough to think you can actually change something." "You don't think I can?" He smiled, but it was sad. "I think the universe doesn't let go of its dead easily. But I hope you prove me wrong." The memorial project moved forward in fits and starts. Doris Whitfield turned out to be a force of nature, a tiny woman in her 70s who'd survived Andrew by hiding in a bank vault and had spent the decades since fighting for recognition of the storm's forgotten victims. She knew everyone in Homestead, and the people she didn't know owed favors to the people she did. By December, we had approval from the city council. By February, we had funding from a coalition of local businesses, including a substantial donation from Publix Corporate, after I wrote them a letter explaining the project. By April, we had a sculptor, a Cuban-American artist named Osvaldo Prieto, who'd lost his grandmother in the storm and wanted to create something meaningful. The plaque would list 12 names: delivery drivers, warehouse workers, utility crews, people who'd gone to work on August 24th, 1992, knowing a Category 5 hurricane was bearing down on them, because they believed their jobs mattered, because they believed people were counting on them. Michael Torres was at the top of the list, just as Doris had promised. In May, I reached out to his children. It took me 3 weeks to work up the courage. I drafted and deleted a dozen messages, trying to find the right words. How do you contact strangers and tell them you want to honor their dead father? How do you explain that you work at a grocery store where his ghost appears every August, still trying to finish the delivery he started 32 years ago? In the end, I kept it simple. I told them about the memorial project. I told them their father's sacrifice deserved recognition. I asked if they'd be willing to attend the dedication ceremony. Diego responded first. His email was short, guarded. "Thank you for reaching out. My sister and I would like to know more about this project. Can we meet in person?" We met at a coffee shop in Kendall, neutral ground. Diego brought Camilla, and they both brought their spouses, a united front against whatever I might turn out to be. Scam artist, grief vulture, crazy person claiming to see ghosts. I told them the truth. Not all of it. Not the part about the truck appearing every August, the manifest dated 1992, the endless loop of attempted deliveries. But I told them about researching Andrew's victims, about discovering how many helpers had been forgotten, about wanting to create something that would last. Camilla cried. Diego stared at his coffee cup for a long time without speaking. Our mother never stopped talking about him, Camilla said finally, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. She kept his uniform in the closet, washed it once a year, even though he was never coming back to wear it. She used to say she could feel him sometimes, like he was still out there, still trying to get home. I felt something tighten in my chest. She wasn't wrong. They both looked at me sharply. I scrambled for words that wouldn't sound insane. Some people leave marks on the world. Your father was one of them, in this memorial. Maybe it's a way of acknowledging that, letting people know he mattered. Diego nodded slowly. We'll be there. August 24th. We'll be there. The ceremony was scheduled for 10 a.m. on the anniversary, at the corner of Campbell Drive and US 1 in Homestead. The old Publix number 547 was gone, replaced by a strip mall with a laundromat and a cell phone repair shop. But the corner still held weight. You could feel it in the air. The same heaviness I'd felt at the Coral Gables store, the sense of history pressing down. About 60 people showed up. Survivors who'd ridden out the storm in that neighborhood. Family members of the names on the plaque. Local officials in suits that looked too hot for August in South Florida. A reporter from the Homestead News Leader, and another from the Miami Herald who'd heard about the project through Doris's network. Osvaldo's sculpture was beautiful. A bronze relief showing a delivery truck driving through stylized storm winds, with 12 names engraved in a column beside it. At the top, Michael Torres, 1958 to 1992. He drove toward the storm so others wouldn't face it alone. Diego spoke first. His voice cracked twice, but he held himself together, talking about the father he barely remembered. A man who'd taught him to ride a bike, who'd made pancakes on Sunday mornings, who'd kissed him goodbye on the morning of August 24th and promised he'd be home before dinner. He never broke a promise to us, Diego said. Not until that day. And I've spent my whole life understanding that it wasn't his fault. The storm took him. But he was trying to get back to us. He was always trying to get back. Kalua spoke next. She'd brought the framed photo from her Facebook post, the one of Michael in his Publix uniform. She held it up so everyone could see. This is my father. This is what a hero looks like. Not a soldier, not a firefighter. Just a man who showed up to work because people needed him. We should all be so brave. After the ceremony, Diego and Camilla found me near the sculpture. Camilla hugged me without warning, her arms tight around my shoulders. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for remembering him. I didn't know what to say. I just hugged her back and hoped that what I'd done would be enough. That night, I drove back to Coral Gables for my shift. The anniversary was here again, and I didn't know what to expect. Would Michael's truck still appear? Would the memorial change anything? Or had I spent a year chasing the fantasy while the real ghosts kept suffering? Caridad was waiting for me in the parking lot. She'd been at the ceremony too. I'd spotted her in the back, standing alone, watching. You did a good thing today, she said. We'll see. She handed me my radio. Whatever happens tonight, I'm proud of you, Danny. Win or lose. I clocked in at 11 p.m. and started my rounds. The store felt different somehow. Lighter. The air wasn't as heavy as it had been the year before, and when I walked past aisle 7, I didn't feel the usual prickle of unease. At 2:30 a.m., the loading dock alarm went off. I grabbed my radio. Caridad, it's happening. Her voice came back immediately. I'm right behind you. Together, we walked toward the back of the store. The loading dock was dark when we pushed through the back door, the overhead lights flickering like they couldn't decide whether to work or not. Rain was falling again. Not the violent downpour of the year before, but a soft, steady drizzle that misted the air and made everything smell like wet concrete and ozone. The truck was there. Same white refrigerated trailer. Same old Publix logo on the side. Same engine rumbling in the darkness, exhaust curling up into the night sky. But something was different this time. The headlights seemed softer, warmer. The rain didn't seem to touch the truck at all. It fell around it, leaving a dry circle on the loading dock like the vehicle existed in its own pocket of calm. The trailer doors were open, and I could see the pallets inside. Canned goods, bottled water, batteries, flashlights. 32 years of hurricane supplies, still waiting to be delivered. Michael Torres stood beside the truck. He looked different. The exhaustion was still there. I don't think anything could erase 32 years of endless driving, but something had changed in his face. The desperation was gone. The hollow, haunted quality in his eyes had softened into something that looked almost like peace. He was looking at something in his hands, a piece of paper folded twice, worn soft at the creases. "Mr. Torres?" I stepped forward, and Carrie Dad let me go. She stayed by the door, watching, but she didn't try to stop me. Michael looked up. When he saw me, he smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. "You were at the ceremony," he said. "I saw you, standing near the back next to the sculpture." He held up the paper in his hands. "Someone gave me this. I found it on my dashboard when I started my route tonight. I don't know how it got there." He handed me the paper. I unfolded it carefully, afraid it might crumble in my fingers. It was a printout of a news article from the Homestead News Leader, dated yesterday. The headline read, "Memorial Honors Hurricane Andrew's Forgotten Heroes." Below it was a photo of Osvaldo's sculpture, the bronze relief of the truck driving through the storm. And beneath that, a list of names. Michael Torres was at the top. "That's me," Michael said, his voice soft with wonder. "That's my name, on a memorial. People came to see it. I watched them. They put flowers at the base. Someone read a poem." He paused, his throat working. "My children were there, Diego and Camilla. They're grown up now. They have families of their own. I watched them from the road and they were okay. They turned out okay." I didn't trust myself to speak. I just nodded. 32 years, Michael continued. 32 years I've been driving this route, trying to find the store in Homestead, trying to deliver these supplies. Every year I'd pull up to a Publix somewhere in South Florida, and I'd ask someone to accept the shipment. And every year, they'd turn me away. They were afraid. I understand that now. They were afraid of getting trapped the way I got trapped. He looked at the truck behind him, at the pallets of supplies that had never reached their destination. But tonight, when I started driving, something was different. The roads made sense again. I could see the signs clearly. I-95, the Turnpike, US 1. I knew where I was going, and when I passed through Homestead, his voice broke slightly. The store wasn't there anymore, but the memorial was, and there were still flowers at the base, even at 2 a.m. Someone had left a candle burning. I thought about Diego and Camilla, about the hugs they'd given me after the ceremony, the tears in their eyes when they saw their father's name carved in bronze. They must have gone back. They must have wanted to spend the anniversary close to him. "Someone remembered," Michael said. "After all this time, someone finally remembered that we tried, that we were just doing our jobs, trying to help people, trying to get supplies to the families who needed them." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the manifest, the yellowed paper I'd seen the year before, dated August 24th, 1992. I think maybe the delivery is complete now. Not the way I planned, not the way I wanted, but complete. He held out the manifest to me. "Take it," he said. "You earned it. You did what I couldn't do. You finished the route. You got the message through." I took the paper. It was warm in my hands, despite the cool rain. And when I looked at it, I saw that someone had stamped it at the bottom in red ink. "Delivery confirmed. August 24, 2024. "What happens now?" I asked. Michael Torres looked toward the east, where the first hint of gray was starting to lighten the horizon. Dawn was still an hour away, but you could feel it coming, that shift in the air that meant the night was ending. "I'm going home," he said. "Elena's waiting for me. She's been waiting a long time." He smiled again, and this time there was no sadness in it. "I know she's gone. I know the kids are grown. I know 32 years have passed and I missed all of it. But wherever she is now, I think I can find her. I think the road will take me there if I just keep driving." He climbed into the cab of the truck. Through the window, I could see him settling into the driver's seat, adjusting the mirrors, putting his hands on the wheel. He looked younger somehow, lighter, like a weight had been lifted that he'd been carrying for longer than I had been alive. The engine revved. The headlights brightened. Michael looked at me through the open window. "Thank you," he said, "for the memorial, for my children, for giving them something to hold on to." He paused. "And tell Kara, Dad. Tell her I'm sorry for scaring everyone all these years. I never meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted to finish my shift." "I'll tell her." He nodded once. Then he put the truck in gear. I watched the truck pull away from the loading dock. It didn't vanish this time. It didn't flicker out of existence or fade into mist. It just drove, down the access road, past the dumpsters, around the corner of the building. I heard it turn onto Bird Road, heard the engine noise fade as it headed west, toward the turnpike, toward Hialeah, toward home. Kara, Dad, was beside me. I hadn't heard her approach. "Is it over?" she asked. "I think so, for Michael at least." We stood there in silence, watching the eastern sky slowly brighten. The rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, washed of whatever heaviness had clung to the store for so many years. "The others," Kara, Dad said quietly. "Marisol, the people in the freezer, they're still here." "I know. We can't build memorials for all of them. We don't even know all their names." I thought about Marisol Aguirre, wandering aisle 7 with her yellow raincoat and her desperate search for supplies to bring home to a daughter who'd grown up without her. I thought about the 11 people in the homestead freezer, pounding on the door, begging to be let out of a tomb that had been their shelter. "Maybe we don't need memorials," I said. "Maybe we just need people to remember, to tell the stories, to make sure they're not forgotten." Kara, Dad looked at me for a long moment. Then she did something I'd never seen her do before. She smiled. "You're going to change things around here, Danny Vega. I can tell. I'm going to try." She patted my shoulder and walked back inside. I stayed on the loading dock a little longer, watching the sun rise over Coral Gables, thinking about ghosts and grief, and the strange ways that love can persist even after death. The manifest was still in my hand. I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. I had more work to do. Diego Torres called me on a Tuesday morning, his voice shaking so badly I could barely understand him at first. "They found it," he said. "The truck. They found my father's truck. A neighbor in Hialeah had noticed it first. An old refrigerated delivery truck parked in the driveway of a house that had been sold 3 times since Elena Torres passed away. The current owners had no idea where it came from. They'd gone to bed the night of August 24th with an empty driveway and woken up to find a vehicle that looked like it belonged in the museum. White paint faded but intact, the old Publix logo still visible on the side. The police were baffled. The truck's VIN matched a vehicle that had been reported destroyed in 1992, crushed beneath a collapsed overpass on the Florida Turnpike. There was no explanation for how it could be sitting in a residential driveway 32 years later, engine cold, keys in the ignition, like someone had just parked it and walked away. But Diego and Camilla knew. When they called me, they already understood. There was a note, Camilla told me when I drove out to meet them at the house. She was holding a piece of paper in a plastic evidence bag. The police had let her keep it after they'd finished documenting the scene. on the dashboard, in my father's handwriting. She handed me the bag. Through the plastic, I could read the words written in faded blue ink. Delivery complete. Going home now, thank you. I stayed with them for an hour, standing in the driveway of a house that had once belonged to their family, looking at a truck that had carried their father through 3 decades of restless wandering. Camilla cried. Diego put his arm around her and stared at the truck like he was waiting for Michael to climb out of the cab and apologize for being late. The truck was eventually towed to a storage facility. Diego is trying to have it restored. He wants to donate it to the History Miami Museum as part of their Hurricane Andrew exhibit. Camilla thinks their father would have liked that, knowing his truck ended up somewhere people could see it and remember. I still work at the Publix in Coral Gables. Still pull the overnight shifts. Still follow the rules on Carrie Dad's laminated card. The store is quieter now than it used to be, but it's not silent. Marisol still appears in aisle 7 sometimes, searching for supplies she'll never bring home to a daughter who grew up without her. The freezer still knocks between 3 and 3:33 a.m., voices pleading to be let out of a tomb that collapsed before I was born. But I'm working on it. Doris Whitfield and I have started researching the 11 people who died in the homestead freezer. We've found 7 names so far, tracked down families, collected stories. There's talk of another memorial, this one at the site of the old store itself. Something to acknowledge what happened in that freezer. Something to let them know the storm is over. And Marisol. I found Lucia. She's a grandmother now, living in a quiet neighborhood in Orlando. And when I told her about the woman in the yellow raincoat who still wanders grocery stores every August, she didn't think I was crazy. She said she'd always known her mother was out there somewhere, still trying to get home. We're planning to meet at the Coral Gables store next August. Lucia wants to see her, wants to tell her that she's okay, that she survived, that she grew up and had children and lived a good life. I don't know if it will work. I don't know if anything will ever fully release the spirits who haunt these aisles and loading docks and freezer doors. But I know that remembering matters. I know that telling their stories matters. And I know that sometimes, if you're patient enough and stubborn enough and willing to believe in things that don't make sense, you can help the dead find their way home